Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Wordfence Live. This week, our show is going to be all about you. We're here to answer your questions on WordPress, WordPress security, Wordfence, some Wordfence features. Anything that we normally talk about here on Wordfence Live is fair game, so we'll be here to answer your questions for the whole show. We're also going to be offering multiple swag opportunities for you to win some cool Wordfence stuff. Stay tuned. We're going to get started in just a moment. Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Wordfence Live. Today is November 24th already, 2020. Hope that you're having a great week, and we're happy that you're joining us here again today. Saw some questions coming in already in the chat, so thanks for coming over early. Let us know where you're viewing from today. I'm again streaming live from just south of the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area. I know we got some other fellow Pennsylvanians as well. I see Dave and Susan are here. I believe Susan is from the Pittsburgh area. Not too bad here weather-wise, thankfully, so haven't got into full-on winter mode yet here. My name is Scott Miller. I'm a customer support engineer here at Wordfence, and in a few moments I'm going to be joined by a special guest today, the man himself, the CEO of Wordfence Defiant. Mark Monder is going to join us for our special show today. We're also going to be joined by your favorites, QA engineer and threat analyst Ram Gall, as well as Chloe Chamberlain. We have some new faces in the chat with Adam Goodland helping from support. So he's going to be helping our customer support lead, Tim Cantrell, who is always in chat. So say hi to those two, and they'll help with any questions that you have. And we'll get to some of those on the air as well here. As I mentioned in today's episode, we're going to ask you to ask us anything here. So whether you have a question about WordPress, general security practices, social engineering, hacking, that would be right up Chloe and Ram's alley there, threat intelligence as well. If it's in our wheelhouse, we're happy to help you and answer your questions here today. So get those queued up and you can send those over to us. If you're new to WordPress, Wordfence, or maybe both, you're in the right place because Wordfence is the #1 choice for securing WordPress sites, and we're currently protecting well over 3 million sites worldwide. If you're excited about the stream and you like the subject today, ask us anything. It would mean a lot if you could hit the like button below the video, and we'll know to do similar things going forward. Typically, we're live every Tuesday here, so you can also hit the subscribe button and the bell. You'll be notified when we go live. As I said, every Tuesday, noon Eastern time. Every once in a while, we post some videos on YouTube, which you would get an alert for, but you're not going to get overloaded. We don't post a bunch. We post some walkthroughs, some feature setup videos. Recently, we posted a video walking you through setting up Wordfence Central Teams, and I'm sure we'll talk about that today at some point. So if you have anything personal to your site, rather than posting a link to the site, if it's compromised, if you're having issues, you could message us directly at feedback@wordfence.com and use the subject line Wordfence Live there. We ask that you don't put anything too sensitive in there, and we'll do our best to moderate it as well. So let's get started by bringing in the whole team here. We got the CEO, Mark Monder. We got Ram Gall from Threat Intel, QA engineer, and Chloe Chamberlain.
Hello,
Ram. How's it going, everybody?
Pretty good. How are you, Scott?
Good, good. Where are you at, Mark? It's like I said, it's not too bad here in the Pittsburgh area.
I'm just south of Denver in Colorado, and it is snowing outside. We got hit by a storm last night, and I woke up to snow everywhere. And so yeah, not too bad. I see we've got some South Africans on the show based on the comments that Sean was throwing up. And so yeah, goeiemorgen, hoe gaan dit? Aangename kennis to my South African friends.
Another Pennsylvania. We might need to get a leaderboard. We got a leaderboard for Chloe and Ram counting the issues and vulnerabilities they found, but maybe some viewer locations, because I have a feeling Pennsylvania, I don't know, I might be in the lead there. We got a Philly.
Scott, you're a local celebrity.
It could be. I mean, we got Arnold Palmer, Mr. Rogers. You know, they're untouchable. But then, you know
Scott Miller.
I could be in the top 1,000 there eventually. Okay, what's going on over there, Chloe?
It's great. It's 27 degrees out and sunny, and I am loving every second of it.
Yeah, you're ready to go snowboarding or something, aren't you? You like the cold weather.
It opened yesterday. The ski resort opened yesterday,
Ah.
so
Did
yeah.
you grow up in Florida, Chloe?
Partially, yeah. I just hate the heat though. I can't stand it.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
I can second that. I grew up in Arizona, and I hate the heat too.
Yeah.
Well, let's get started. Before we get started, though, as I mentioned, we're going to have multiple swag opportunities today. So let's get the first one out there. This one is related to Mark. So we're going to be posting the link here, and you can click that. It's not going to be Chloe trying to social engineer you or anything. We promise.
This time.
We
Not
promise.
this time. So click the link. You want to be one of the first 5 to correctly guess the following. What was the vulnerability that led to Mark Monder's site being hacked and eventually led to him creating Wordfence? So if you know that, throw that in over there. Be one of the first 5.
That
And
might
like
be
I
a
said,
tough
we're going to...
question because I took my blog offline a while ago. So.
Ooh.
That's what I said in the pre-show. Yeah, we got a couple tough questions here, but stick around, and we're going to have multiple giveaways here today. So, okay, so we're going to be answering a bunch of questions today. The first one that I see, if you all are ready, any advice on running multiple websites with Wordfence on the same server, potential performance impacts, and they mentioned performance optimization.
Well, I think one thing that you definitely want to do is make sure that you have a reasonable memory limit on the hosting account, maybe 256 M at least. I would recommend it that if you optimize the firewall on the sites, optimize them separately. Make sure that one site's not in a subfolder of the other, or else the firewall from the parent level site is going to cover the sub site, but then you won't be able to find which site was actually being attacked. Honestly, though, Wordfence and the Wordfence firewall don't make that much of a performance impact. We did do some measuring on a brand new WordPress site with FasterSlow. Check out fasterslow.com. And the overall performance difference between a fresh site and a fresh site with Wordfence installed and the firewall optimized was about 2 points. So not terribly heavy. The only thing I can really say is that if you are on shared hosting, you will want to offset the scan times of the 2 sites, since that is the one thing that can be a little bit more resource intensive depending on how much content you are scanning.
It's funny, Ram. Like I remember when we launched Wordfence around 2012, and we only started hiring around 2015, and the early version we didn't have many users, and so we didn't really care about when scans kicked off and when certain things happened. And then at some point, and I don't know if it was around 2015 when we started building up the team and after Matt joined, it might have been, but we put in an algorithm that kind of staggered scans and that kind of thing and spread it over time. And obviously a lot more performance improvements have happened since then. But I guess the point is that from our side, we're already working to make sure that we don't have a thundering herd effect where you have all websites kicking off scans at roughly the same time. And so if you have multiple sites on a single server running Wordfence, they would benefit from that because they would spread out, when they're doing things that are potentially a little bit more performance intensive, they would spread that out rather than kicking off scans at exactly the same time. Kind of on the hour, for example, would be, I think we used to do that a long time ago, and then we stopped. So,
Yeah. And I mean, we do some staggering. I just like, manually setting whenever I have my scans set to run. So just a personal preference.
yeah, but it's cool that our team, the same team that built Fast or Slow, is, it's the same engineering team that puts out Wordfence releases. And so we are very aware, cognizant of performance because we've got this amazing tool that uses Google's own tooling, which is Lighthouse, to measure your website performance across all dimensions, from the DNS request to server performance to the actual web page rendering from 18 locations around the world. And so if we put out a word, and we monitor our own assets, our own properties with Fast or Slow. So if we were to put out a release that had a performance impact, we'd see it immediately because we'd go to Fast or Slow and be like, oh wait, like it's impacted this or that. But as Ram said, the impact is negligible.
Another thing I wanted to bring up, and it slipped my mind initially, is we had a new post RAM, right, for PHP 8, and that's coming out this week. I'm not sure exactly when. I'm sure you know, Ram. So you wrote a
came
good
out
article
yesterday, actually.
Yeah, and it's a
yesterday.
really good one.
Thanks.
And that gained some traction also on Reddit. There was I believe, a Reddit post that was discussing that as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what you had written about there?
Well, I guess the main takeaway is that PHP 8 is going to be very good in the long run, but it'll be a little while before all your favorite plugins and themes are compatible with it. WordPress core, its next release is planning to be beta compatible, which means that just about everything should work, but there might be some unexpected edge cases where things don't work as intended. And I think we're more or less in a similar position in our plan going forward as well for Wordfence, the plugin. PHP 8 is a pretty large change. There's going to be some deprecated functions, some functions that used to work and won't work at all anymore. Instead of just telling you that you shouldn't use them, it's going to be pickier in how it accepts data, how it returns data. You might, instead of getting a string or false from the result of a function, you're only ever going to get a string. So if your program is counting on getting a false back, then it might work unexpectedly. It is going to be faster, but we won't necessarily reap the benefits of the speed improvements from the just-in-time JIT compiler for some time yet, because we don't actually know the best way to use it yet for PHP as a language. And so far there's no real improvement for web applications like WordPress from that. But it is going to make things more secure in general. It does do saner, loose comparisons, and it's going to be a good thing in the long run. But it might be a little bit rough. It might take a while for developers to get everything up to date and to make it compatible. But if you are a developer, please do start working on that, because it'll be awesome.
So PHP 8 and PHP in general, their release cycle, every time I see a release like this, it makes me really, really happy, because in the 90s, I was a Perl developer and I coded in Perl 5. And I wrote amazing applications, in my humble opinion, in Perl, job search engine, a meta search, and geo-blogging platform, and so on. And I loved Perl. And obviously, I went over to PHP when I wrote Wordfence. But what happened with Perl was we were using Perl 5, probably around 98. And then I was coding in that until about, 07, 08, something like that. And they wanted to create Perl 6. And it was this massive release that they worked on. And it was a complete refactoring of the language. And it took, I think they've put something out now, but it's 20 years later. And the dev community just couldn't wait that long. And they essentially abandoned Perl. And a lot of you younger folk, I'm 46 years old, so I've been around for a while. But, Perl is kind of, a lot of people kind of look at Perl and say, haha, Perl. But it was incredibly fast with mod Perl in the late 90s. It was game-changing for for websites. And then it just lost its way. And so with PHP, you have these regular release cycles that might seem, from PHP 7 to PHP 8, that it's, oh my God, it's like a huge change. And it's, you're a developer and you're like, I've got to, now I've got to deal with all these functions that have been deprecated, as Ram was saying, and so on. But it's actually not. It is incremental changes. It is a regular release cycle. There's a steady cadence of improving the language in terms of type safety and, security and performance in particular. Huge performance increase with PHP 7. And it's very, very healthy. It is the thing that will avoid PHP becoming Perl. And so for me, I see a very long and healthy future for PHP if they keep doing this. And I think having the dev community support that and kind of be aware of what the alternative is, it could go the way of Perl. So, someone moved your cheese, but it's cool. It's fine. You'll be fine.
Mark, Susan said that you're a youngster compared to her. Susan's one of our favorite viewers here. She is always in the stream and has some good questions for us.
Well, Susan,
so-
I can assure you, you're a youngster compared to a gentleman I just made friends with. Our company just leased a warehouse in Centennial in Colorado for a variety of reasons, and it's family owned, and the landlord is 94 years old. His name's Don, and he is as sharp as a tack. He served in World War II, and him and I have become friends. And I hope I have that much runway in front of me, and I hope you do too. So.
We had a comment from Glenn saying he is still using Perl 5. So we have some good questions in here right now. I believe it is Andy who asked, is CDN preferred in combination with Wordfence as an extra security layer, for example, Cloudflare? And we talk about this,
Chloe
from time
should
to
probably
time.
take that one.
Let's have Chloe take this one.
Yeah, I would say that you can definitely use the CDN for better availability of your site, as in conjunction with Wordfence. I think it's a great idea to layer your security and have different things at different layers. And I would say, yeah, definitely use it if you can, if it's not going to affect your site negatively. We always talk about security being, you have to look at the risk and analyze the risk of your site and say, do you want your site to be a little bit more available? Do you want it to be a little bit more secure? Do you want better confidentiality and integrity? I think it's a great idea to keep using those two together, but keep in mind that it could affect other things. So just take a look at your risk trade-offs and make sure that that's definitely something that works for you. It's different for all sites. So
Can I? So you guys don't let me do engineering around here anymore. So I'm going to ask you both to unpack that a little bit for me, because I guess on the one hand you have a cloud WAF that kind of sits as an intermediary between the client and the backend server, the origin. Mm-hmm. And then there's this other idea of a CDN, and I might be stuck in the 1990s when I'm thinking of a CDN as something that has assets that are geographically close to the client, but are not necessarily sitting between the client and the server. It's you load the HTML, and then the images and the JavaScript and the CSS, the static assets, are loaded from a CDN. But I have a feeling that my concept is stuck in the 90s. I don't know, Ram or Chloe, can you help me out here a little?
From my knowledge of Cloudflare, they still do that to some extent. Mm-hmm. I mean, they do have some more aggressive caching where I think that they do work some magic on their end to maybe take a static image of your site. And I think this is especially in cases where, your site might get down. How they have the... I forget what the feature is called.
Yeah, but I know
the feature
about,
where it'll keep your site up if your site goes down for a few minutes. So
right, are most WAFs and CDNs kind of sitting in front of the origin these days, as opposed to CDNs that just provide static assets that load faster? Then
for Cloudflare, it's definitely sitting in front of the origin. Yeah. Like everything has to be routed through Cloudflare, especially if you've got your origin configured correctly to reject any requests that aren't coming through the CDN.
So in that sense, you're actually adding another security layer. But if you're just using a CDN that's hosting static assets, it actually doesn't provide a layer in front of the origin, right? Okay.
Correct. But I think that most of the good modern CDNs do effectively sit in front of the origin. You just have to also configure your origin to work with them and not allow anyone to, set an entry in their hosts file to bypass it.
Right.
Which most people forget to do.
Yep.
Yep.
If you're just joining, we're talking about Cloudflare and CDNs and how they work. So we got a bunch of good questions here. Looks like Digicel asked if people logged into WooCommerce site as customers have a better chance to hack the site. Would it be safer to make everyone purchase as a guest so that no one can log into the site but himself?
I feel like this is something that Chloe and I should both answer. I'll let Chloe go first.
Yeah, so that's a trick question because technically there are going to be vulnerabilities that will be easier for people to exploit if they can get a customer account. But at the same time, I don't want to scare you and say that you shouldn't allow any customer registration on your site, because then that would kind of lose some functionality and make it a little bit less of an enjoyable experience for customers in some cases. But yes, there are vulnerabilities that will be exploitable. And by allowing that registration, you are opening a little door that attackers can possibly get in. But you can put some mitigations in place and make sure you keep your plugins up to date. Use the firewall. You can offset that risk by implementing some security controls there for you. So yes, it will open a little door, but at the same time, there's things you can do to help mitigate that risk.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Chloe, that you don't want to not enable registration, because from a business perspective, it allows you to establish a relationship with customers rather than just kind of a one-off purchase and then you never see them again. So definitely keep that there. But as Chloe pointed out, this is really, in the case of Privisk vulnerabilities, Chloe, I guess they're one step further along the privilege path, right?
Yeah.
Now, we have another question asking if Wordfence covers hardening as well as firewall and scanning, and we do have quite a few features that help with that. Any off the top of your head, Ram, Mark, Chloe, that you want to talk about there?
Author scans, we do disable author scans by default, and we do allow you to disable code execution in the uploads directory, but that is contingent upon, your server configuration. You have to be, in Apache, something that will accept HT access directives. So it is limited, and I feel like that is one of the main reasons we don't offer some hardening options, is because a lot of them are very much going to be specific to your use case. Something that works very well to harden for one use case is going to completely wreck usability for another use case. So, Mark, do you have any insight on this?
Well, I guess from my perspective, the best hardening that you get when you install Wordfence is the firewall and then the malware scan. And the firewall code executes before WordPress does. Mm-hmm. And so any request that hits your website that is going to execute PHP code, our code examines that request first and determines whether it's safe or not. And that's where our firewall rules come into play. And those are, for premium customers, those rules are released in real time. And so that is a tremendous amount of hardening, because, let's say you were to install a vulnerable version of, I'm not going to say it because I'll ruin your question that you asked earlier, Scott. But let's say Revolution Slider, which is an old vulnerability. But let's say you had a vulnerable version of that. That would not be exploitable because Wordfence's firewall rules would protect you. And so, and that applies to many, many vulnerabilities. And so as soon as you enable Wordfence's firewall in, is it optimized mode, Ram? Mm-hmm. Yeah. You have that execution flow where Wordfence is examining everything that's coming in before it's touching WordPress's PHP code, your plugin PHP code, any PHP included in your themes, and that's, it's like a bulletproof vest, but better, like body armor for your site. And then you've got the second layer of security, which is our malware scan. And so if something does get in, then we'll detect that. Or if you have, I think we detect vulnerabilities now as well, right, Ram?
We do. The scanner does detect if you've got a vulnerable version of any plugins installed. Even the free version of the plugin should tell you. So, yeah.
Right. And as you point out, the free version of the plugin has, I think, 99% of the firewall rules or something absurdly high like that.
Right around there, yeah.
Yeah. So whether it's free or paid, it's amazing protection. And in the sense of hardening your site, which I think is what the question was, you have those two layers. Now you've got the firewall, which is prevents actual intrusions, and then you've got the scanner, which is not just malware scanning, but it's scanning for security issues as well that allow you to further harden your site. That's my 3 cents.
Oh, yeah, I was just thinking of more traditional hardening, turn off PHP execution type stuff, but firewall does take a lot of weight off of those, especially.
So we're about almost 25 past the hour here. Good time to go with swag question number 2. I'm not sure if we've had 5 correct on the first one or not. I'm sure we'll get word here in a second, but that I know a few people were stumped by that one in the chat I saw. So question number 2, we're going to get a link in the chat. And question number 2 is, how many vulnerabilities has Wordfence found in themes and plugins this year? And of course, those of you who have been watching for a while have a lead on this, because we have had a leaderboard for Chloe and Ram and some.
So I didn't
past
know
episodes.
that there was a leaderboard, and that Chloe and well, I don't know if you two were competing, but I think maybe Scott or Kathy has you two competing against each other on this leaderboard.
Yeah, I don't think Chloe and Ram knew there was a leaderboard either until it got thrown up on the screen. So.
Nice.
So yeah, get your guesses in for that. That'll be the second swag question, and we have another one coming up. So be sure to stick around. Get your questions in as well. We've had some good questions. So this would be a good one for you guys. How do hackers find new WordPress sites? So, commonly whenever I create up a new test site or something, I start seeing brute force attempts. And if I throw premium, right on it, I see a lot of blacklist blocks, fairly quickly. Chloe, Ram, anything there as far as how those are found so quickly?
As far as how new WordPress sites are found so quickly?
Yep.
Well, from what we've seen on some fairly large-scale attacks, okay, so there are some tools out there that do give you a list of, known WordPress sites. Some of them are fairly expensive, but at the same time, there's also open source resources you can use to get a, smaller and less complete list of WordPress sites. One assumes that attackers likely share lists of WordPress sites. Possibly sell lists of WordPress sites, at least from what we've seen of the probing attacks targeting function injection vulnerabilities in the Epsilon framework themes recently. It does seem likely that attacker may have been, finding out which sites are vulnerable and, possibly for resale of a list of vulnerable sites if they're not going to use or attack those sites on their own. So, I mean, there is a market for this kind of information, even for, legitimate uses for it. Marketing professionals want to find out, how many sites are built with what. And so this is information that can be bought or discovered if you're willing to do the legwork.
Is that about what you're thinking, Chloe, Mark?
Yeah, so there's just like bots going out on the web and scraping sites. And if you go to your WordPress site, right-click it and then view page source. And if you go through it, there's so many hints in there that you can see that you're running a WordPress site, and that's one of the ways that they're able to detect them. And yeah, so you just have bots going out there finding them all, and then like Ram said, attackers are selling these lists and using these and possibly working together. And yeah, so that's a pretty good explanation.
So when I think about this, I always think about how I would find new sites to exploit. And I'd be really interested in finding new sites to exploit because the site owner hasn't had time to install Wordfence and maybe was in a rush when they configured the site. So they're like, oh, I'll just use this password that I reused somewhere else and so on. And so if I was going to do this, what I'd do is perhaps, and Chloe and Ram, tell me if I'm full of it here, but I'd probably try to find a list of newly registered domains.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a resource like that?
I'm not sure, but I suspect there is. I'm not sure whether it's free or paid is the only real question.
All right, and then isn't there a certificate transparency project where you can see perhaps new websites that have acquired an SSL certificate, which might give me a list of new websites pretty much in real time?
I can think of, say, census.io, which, you can often use to find origin IPs. I'm not sure that if they have a real-time ticker like that, but one could probably find some way to use it like that.
Yeah, we don't sell SSL certificates at Wordfence, and we kind of just rely on our customers to install them, working with their host. But I think there's a couple of transparency projects out there where you can potentially see newly registered domains as they acquire SSL certs, and that would be super interesting for me. But yeah, I would, if I was malicious, this would be juicy information for the reasons I pointed out. The sites aren't yet fully configured and fully locked down, therefore.
Now, Chloe and Ram, we've been at this for months, and I think this is the first time this has happened. So Mark's question number one for the swag here has had no correct guesses. So
Really?
Mark, you can take it away here. What was the vulnerability that led to your site being hacked and then formed Wordfence as a result?
So I was running a blog at markmaunder.com, which I've pretty much taken offline at this point. I blog at another blog these days, but I think I've been running that blog for years. And in 2011, that site was hacked, and admittedly, I hadn't been maintaining it very well. I'd been very busy trying to build a business in another space, and so my site was hacked. And I couldn't believe it, and I was furious because I may or may not have been involved in a little bit of black hat hacking in the early 90s, and so no one hacks me, and so I immediately just dropped everything and became obsessed with reverse engineering how this person got in, and I figured out that I had something called TimThumb installed because I'd installed a theme. I think the theme was Parallelis, if I'm not mistaken, and it came with timthumb.php, which was a utility, and I think still is a utility maintained by Ben Gilbanks these days, and who's the original author, that will resize, will create thumbnails. And if I recall correctly, and you guys, we chatted about this a little bit before the show, but I think what was happening is TimThumb would, you could kind of feed it a URL as a query string parameter, and it would then go off and grab an image and from some external resource. And I think what the attacker had done is fooled it into grabbing PHP code and dropping it into a publicly accessible directory. And so the attacker could then access that script, which is actually a shell, which would give them full control of the site. Chloe, do you want to just mention to the audience what a shell is?
Yeah, so a shell is basically a way to establish a connection with a server, basically from your computer. So, for example, you could put a script on a site, and it would say you could use netcat, for example, which is a way to communicate, basically. And then it'll establish a shell. And basically, you can do execute commands like ls to list all the files, make a new file, all sorts of different things. So it's basically a way to run commands on the server like you would if you were SSHing in or something, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And so once you have dropped a shell onto a server that you have access to, you have full control of that server. You can execute any code you want. You have full access to the database potentially, and so on. And so that's what they'd done. And I guess what I did is got hold of the author and let them know that there was an issue. I wrote a patch for TimThumb, contributed it back to Ben Gilbanks, and I went a little overboard. I added a whole bunch of other stuff, and I think Ben probably got my patch and his eyes popped out of his head, and he was like, "Oh my god!" And I think he made some changes which are sensible because he's got a community of users out there that he has to support, and they don't necessarily want to have TimThumb change too much. But we basically ended up collaborating and making it secure, and I believe it's still around. And I reconnected with Ben recently on Reddit, I think it was. But that at the time, Kerry, who is my co-founder and wife, and I had been entrepreneurs full-time since 2003, and we had launched a job search engine which was popular and was mildly successful, a geoblogging platform, an inline commenting system where you could highlight text and post comment on the text, and so on, and something called Feedjit, which is a live traffic feed, which some of you might have heard about because there was over 1 million sites using that at some point, but all of them weren't commercially successful. And so we were looking around for an opportunity. And if there's any entrepreneurs on the show, I'll just digress for just a second. We had burned through our 401ks and were kind of on the bones of our asses at that point. And I had defined 4 criteria for a successful business opportunity. It was a business that was in a growing space, in a space where people spend money, where there was a gap in the market that we could fill, and where we could be the best in the world at it. And WordPress Security fulfilled all of those 4 criteria. And I saw that thanks to my site getting hacked. And so basically dropped everything, spent the next 8 months writing the first version of Wordfence, and launched it with a business model. And we did that because Kerry and I had been entrepreneurs for long enough that we knew that we needed to actually wrap some kind of paid model around it. And we launched it, and it just started slowly growing, but we were experienced enough to realize that slow growth, the trajectory that it was on, indicated that a couple of years down the line, we'd be in a very good place. And so that was around 2012 when we launched. By 2015, we made our first 2 hires, and it was Tim Cantrell, who is a legend, the Timster, and then Matt Barry, pretty much at the same time, who and Tim and Matt are both with us today. Tim runs our customer service team, Matt runs the engineering team, and they're both super cool dudes. And our team is now, I think it's around 40 people, probably about 25 full-time employees, US-based. That is the story.
Yeah, so that I had a feeling that one was going to be a tough one for our viewers to guess there. Tim Thumb. Yeah, so we got a few questions here. Billy Neal asks, I believe he's asking, what is the basic difference, if any, between the malware scan Wordfence does and a DAST tool such as Sonarqube, I believe that is. He's asking, is it totally different ballpark or similar?
It is totally different. The Wordfence malware scanner does not do any kind of dynamic code analysis. That would be very resource intensive, and that might actually slow your site down. The actual Wordfence scan, we use malware detection signatures, and we also check your plugin versions to see if any known vulnerable versions of plugins or themes are installed. So we don't actually do any sort of like dynamic or static code analysis on your, plugins or themes via the malware scan, unless you count searching for indicators of compromise as code analysis. But yes, that is one of the things that makes, malware scanning is much less resource intensive than the type of code analysis you're talking about. So
That's right, Ram, because like in a sense, we do provide that value because our team does code analysis offline.
Oh, yes.
And finds vulnerabilities. And if there is a vulnerability in something you're running that we've discovered through code analysis, the scan will include it in our scan results, and the scan will let you know that you have an issue on your site, but without having that impact of extremely resource-intensive static or dynamic code analysis happening on your site as you're trying to serve your customers, right?
Yeah, and without all the false positives that you get when you try to automate that kind of process completely.
Exactly. Totally.
So, yep.
We have another question. So we have a graphic for this one, I believe. Brandon Godding, a regular viewer of ours, and maybe our unofficial mascot, Billy, the dog. He has a question here. We have my question: how do you handle updates for plugins bundled with themes that have vulnerabilities?
I think Chloe had the best answer for this one, honestly.
Yeah, so when you're picking out a theme at the start, when you're picking out the theme, I would try and make sure that you're picking out a theme where you don't have a paid plugin that you don't want to pay for, just so that in the long run you know that you won't run into that problem. But if you do have that and your site's built on that and that's already a thing, you are protected with the Wordfence firewall. We write rules for those. So in the meantime, while you can't get that updated, we do have that protection for you. But with that being said, I would definitely recommend reaching out to the theme developer and saying, hey, there's this vulnerability. Really appreciate it if you get it patched. I'd also even try reaching out to WP Bakery, for example, as one of them. I'd reach out to the plugin developer specifically and see if there's anything they can do for you as well. Because you do accept that risk if you have a plugin that has paid updates and you're not paying for those paid updates. That's something that you should be conscious of when you're using that. But again, you'll have that protection from Wordfence, and then I would recommend reaching out to the developers, and then I would also see if there's any other way you can get an update. But not using old plugins or themes or anything. Rim and I talked about this earlier, but just trying to find how you can update it the quickest, but remember that you are protected with Wordfence while you are trying to get that figured out. If that makes sense.
Can we do Glenn's question?
What?
Can we do Glenn's question?
Ooh.
It's in
Yes.
the in the chat.
Yes, I think you'd be best to do Glenn's question, Mark.
So I guess Glenn Carey's question is, how do you plan to stay number one in the market? So I love that question, and I think that if I weren't a software engineer and I was I'm just going to clear my throat for a second. Sorry about that. And I was kind of from a business background, like an MBA background. I would want to, I don't know, raise money, do marketing, take out, a radio ad or something like that. Our approach is different because our DNA is rock solid engineering and research as well. And through our engineering and our research, we're able to provide a tremendous amount of value to our free customers, which numbers somewhere between 3 and 5 million at this point, and we consider them customers. We don't consider them, just people that are, freeloading or something like that. We actually provide them with support in the support forums. Tim and his team maintain over, I think it's 90 or 95% resolved rate in those forums, and we monitor those numbers. And then, a free product, as we've mentioned on this show already, provides something like 95% of the value that the paid product provides. And so, we're able to provide a huge amount of value to people, to the community out there via the free product, and then a huge amount of value to the community via the research that Ram and Chloe publish, and occasionally other team members that we have. And that research in particular is thought leadership. It leads the industry as groundbreaking. It hits the press on a weekly basis in ZDNet, Bleeping Computer, and many other publications, I think CIO Magazine and so on. And we know those journalists by name because we're just chatting with them all the time because we're breaking news. And that is freely available. Other vendors can use it to update their products and make them more secure. We don't try to kind of hold that back and keep it to ourselves, and we don't keep our product to ourselves and, only have a paid version. And so, on the one hand, we're leading the community with thought leadership. We're also providing a free security product that does a great job of securing your website. But then on the other hand, it's sustainable because we have a business model that charges, I think it's about $8.25 per month per website for Wordfence, for the premium version of Wordfence, where you get real-time firewall rules and so on. And that part of the business is doing extremely well. We are profitable. We're self-funding. We don't need to raise outside money. And so we're able to retain and attract the best engineers and researchers in the industry, like Chloe, Ram, and the rest of our team, who are absolutely brilliant. Matt Barry, Ryan. There's a long list of great engineers who work for us, who are either building the product, testing the product, doing R&D, involved in our threat intelligence team, as Ram is. Or Ram, you've been working with Greg on a huge machine learning project recently. Did I say that? And so we're able to innovate because our business model is very healthy and sustainable. And so that I think that's hard to replicate, especially if you're dealing with a competitor like Wordfence that has been doing that for years. And we've really kind of found that sweet spot in terms of serving the community, and then serving our customers with a really great product that is the best security solution in the industry. And so that's it. That's how we plan to compete, is through excellence in research and engineering, and providing that value both to our free customers and our free audience on the blog and the mailing list, and then also to our paid customers, who get a tremendous amount of value out of the real-time firewall rules, the real-time IP blacklist, and the amazing support that the customer service team does, and so on. So I hope that answers your question, Glenn.
That is a good answer. And speaking of products, let's give away more swag here with our third question. I'm not sure how many correct guesses we've had on the second one, hopefully more than the first one, but the third one here we think will be a little easier for everybody. We're going to post a link. You can get your guess in when you see the link. What is the name of the Wordfence podcast? And we suspected those first two might be a little more difficult, so we threw that one in there for you. Hopefully some of you get that one right. Now the second one I did not mention, but I think we go closest without going over. Is that right, Ram? Chloe, is that what we talked about in the show for the number of vulnerabilities that have been found? I think we're going closest without going over.
I think so, yeah. That
so,
should be fine.
The Price is Right method there.
So yeah,
we have some other good questions. I know you two have discussed one in the chat. Do you want to get to that one, Ram, or do we want to skip that? We got some others.
Which one were you talking about?
I believe that was Roberto.
Oh,
was
yeah. I
that.
think we decided to deal with that one in the...
Can send us an email there.
Yeah, have him send us an email, just because that might end up revealing sensitive information about the site in question, and didn't find any gotchas with it. So,
See, our producer is saying, mention the 1-year guarantee.
oh, that on the other hand, yeah, our site cleanings now have a 1-year guarantee, and we do have a question for how much they cost nowadays. Scott, how much do they cost nowadays?
I want to say it's $4.90, but you caught me off guard there.
It's $4.95.
Here, let's see.
I was close.
I think it was. Is it? Oh god, I think it's $4.90.
$4.90. It is
$4.90.
$4.90.
$4.90.
Yeah, and then I think
Okay.
the expedited product is like $9.50.
Okay. And
Yeah.
what's the difference there? So the expedited, you're getting service much quicker, right?
Within 4 hours, 24/7, 365. So,
And both
like-
come with a 1-year guarantee as of very recently.
Right. Yeah. So that was a huge shift. We were just 90 days, and we went to. So if we clean your hacked site, as long as you take the precautions that we ask you to, we'll clean it for free if you have another incident within the next year. So essentially, you have our engineering team has your back for the next year. And so it might seem like $4.90 is expensive for a site cleaning, but considering that you then get support from us for the next year, I think that's pretty awesome value.
and a license, and our site cleaning people are
Right.
really smart. Like, I'll just read stuff they post and things they've discovered. It's like, wow, these guys know what they're doing.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we've now gone to a 24/7, 365 operation because our priority site cleaning has to be available for that time, and we have some interesting new products in the pipeline that are related to this, but Kathy's going to kick my ass if I talk about them right now.
Now, Mark had mentioned the guarantee is valid if you follow up with what we send over in the report. Can you give us an idea, Chloe, of some of those things that we ask customers to do after a site cleaning?
Yeah, so like things like changing your passwords. If your site was compromised because your password was compromised, it's really important that you change your passwords. There's things like making sure your file permissions are set correctly. It's just making sure that everything is optimally secured and hardened on the back end, so that you don't have a way for intruders to get back in. So it's basically getting your site cleaned, getting a nice little audit at the same time, and then you have a guarantee for a year, so it's pretty great.
And don't leave any nulled plugins or things installed.
No.
Right.
Yeah,
I think one of the
update
biggest
all
things
your
is-
stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is don't run multiple WordPress sites on the same hosting account. Is that right, Claire?
Yeah. That's a
Um,
big one.
Is that one of our current recommendations for site cleaning customers? Do you know offhand? Sorry,
I-
Mike. Sorry.
Yeah, no, sorry. I do know that at the beginning we always ask you to either isolate your accounts, or we do need to clean all the sites in the same account.
Right.
I don't know if we recommend in the report directly if we ask you to isolate those after we
Yeah.
clean them.
I think if we're not doing it now, we're moving to that for the new thing that I just kind of mentioned. And one of the reasons is, just like a bit of a war story here, and we did this under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't tell you who the customer was, but it was a very large customer that is a name brand that you recognize. They had a major incident, a major breach. Our team went in there and investigated, and it turns out that they were running multi-site with 1,600 sites on the multi-site install. And we went in and we figured out how they got in. We figured out whether they pivoted within the network, and did a full incident response. But it was challenging for them because once that ship has sailed and you've set up multi-site, or you've set up a lot of WordPress sites in a single hosting account, your attack surface is massive. So if you think about all of the plugins and themes that exist on, say, a multi-site installation with 1,600 sites, that if any one of those is compromised where the attacker can gain remote code execution, all of the sites are compromised. And it's the same with having multiple sites in a single hosting account. If any one of the sites an attacker is able to gain RCE, all of the sites are compromised. And so you can think of that. The metaphor the industry uses is an attack surface, and you want to reduce your attack surface as far as possible. I think the risks of being compromised increase not linearly but exponentially as you add sites to an account or as a multi-site installation grows. So it's just something to be aware of.
Cool. And Roberto was asking, yes, Roberto, that your case was the one where we recommended emailing in. I do actually kind of want to look into it. I can tell you that the file that the request was sent to does not actually exist in the legit copy of the theme I was able to dig up. So I'm curious about this, but I'm fairly sure that your case, that wasn't actually the request that ended up with your site hacked initially. So I just didn't want to discuss it too much more.
Dean had an interesting question I don't believe we have covered. He says he loves Wordfence, uses it on both of his sites. He works in IT and follows the Wordfence blog regularly. His question, do we see patterns with hacked sites based on where a site is hosted? Probably, more common on like a shared hosting platform, right, Chloe, Ram?
I mean, shared hosting accounts are probably the majority of websites, period. But if you're hosting more than one site on a hosting account, as we just discussed, that does increase your attack surface, like Mark just said. But sorry, Chloe has something to say too.
I was just going to say, every now and then we do spot similarities coming from the same hosting account, and we have a couple of blog posts out there about them. I believe TSO host was one of them, but it's due to service misconfigurations and such, and then we'll work with the hosting provider. It doesn't happen all the time, but we do catch it when it does happen, and we do work with the hosting providers to make sure things are fixed if it is something that might be a little wonky on the back end.
Like the VDEC thing, right? Sorry.
Internally, we refer to those as service vulnerabilities, where a host has a vulnerability that's causing their sites to be infected, and it's not uncommon.
Yeah, like that VDEC thing that we found, what last year? Where people were grabbing configuration information across accounts, like where, if you were hosted on the same server, literal server, as another person's account, you could literally, reach across the file system and grab someone from a completely different account's WP config file.
Yeah. That was like a year or two ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds gnarly.
Yeah, that was.
Yeah.
We also had a question, why do we not auto remove malware with our plugin? And can you guys give an idea, why we don't recommend that?
I can jump in here.
Go for it, Mark.
As a guy who used to work in operations, I started off my career in the early 90s as, believe it or not, a certified Novell engineer. And then I became a Microsoft systems engineer, and I worked for banks, Coca-Cola, the BBC, various other big companies. And if you're in ops, your goal is to keep systems up and running and keep them secure. And Chloe mentioned the CIA triad earlier. In the security industry, we think about security as having kind of three parts: confidentiality, availability, and integrity. And I think that one of the biggest risks with auto removing malware is having the security service or plugin that you're using actually affect your availability, which in our industry is a bad thing. It's a kind of compromise. A DDoS attack affects availability, and so you can have something think that it's removing malware, but take the site down. And if it's 3 a.m. in the morning and you're in the U.S., you're fast asleep, this software that's trying to be really smart and removing something that looks like malware takes your site down, and you've got a lot of customers in Europe that now can't purchase, you're losing a ton of money and a ton of brand goodwill and all that stuff. So it might sound fine. It may be okay if you're a hobbyist and you don't care if your site goes down for a time, but we tend to not do that for that reason. We are used by a lot of larger customers. We're used by some Fortune 500s. We are used by universities, and it kind of matters that their stuff stays online. So we try to be a bit more professional about it.
That's more or less my take. I once worked for a company that did automatic malware removal, and I have some stories about how that can go wrong.
And we'll just leave it.
Some of which I've caused.
Yeah.
Always want human intervention.
Bar conversations with Ram are a lot of fun. It's also where I met your gong for the first time. You're
Yes.
a certain party in Phoenix.
Wait, should I break out the gong?
Yes.
I think, yeah.
Mark,
Yes.
do you want me to break out the gong right now?
Do it.
Okay, hold on.
Okay, so we have this thing at Wordfence or Defiant, our company, where okay, go for it. That microphone distorting.
We always hear it in the meeting, but now I can actually visualize what is.
Okay, how much clipping was that?
It was unbelievable. That's the first thing I said. It was like, but when we launch something at Defiant, like a new Wordfence release or Fast or Slow or one of our other products, we all have bells that we ring on the call just to kind of celebrate the engineers who've put out this new code. Ram has a gong, and that's his gong. Oh,
Kathy has said in the YouTube comments, "Oh my!" I think she is about to officially clock out of the show. The gong has come out. We had another question here that I have lost. Andy has asked, is there an option to force users to change passwords after a certain period of time? I know we have an option to enforce strong passwords, but I do not believe we have one to force them to change that.
We don't, but that's a pretty cool product idea.
So that's an interesting debate, right, Chloe? Isn't that, there's the thinking on that has shifted, and I'm a little out of the loop right now, but I think, do you have any current data on that?
Yeah, so there's like a debate going on, like if you have to change it every 30 days, is it going to be less secure because people are going to start writing it down to remember it, or use weaker ones so they can remember it easier. And the debate there is that, is it more secure to have them change it or not? My viewpoint on it is today we have password managers for that reason. And so it is a good idea to change critical passwords maybe once every 180 days, 60 days, whatever, depending on how critical the asset is. That is something to keep in mind today, but the debate is it something that we do want, or is it something that is going to make your site, your password less secure? Does that sound about right?
And so, so I guess in the 90s, Microsoft's Windows or NT or whatever the heck they're calling it now, it would have, okay, change your password every 3 weeks, and you'd memorize your password. And these days, and across the board, people would just use the same password on everything. And if they were forced to change it, they just add a 1 or a 2 or whatever incremented. And those passwords were extremely insecure. These days, one of the most important things you can do is use a different password on each system, and use a password. That's number one, and then use a password that's really hard to crack. And so, 20 characters, alphanumeric with potentially special characters, and you can't remember that. And you definitely can't remember all of those unique passwords across all systems. And so the only way to do it is using a password manager. And provided your password manager remains secure, and 1Password, as far as I'm aware, guys, hasn't been compromised. I think LastPass was, but 1Password has not been compromised.
I don't think so either.
Okay.
I do know
Not to my
LastPass
knowledge.
was. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And so, 1Pass is pretty good. And you end up with a pretty huge database if you're a busy person online of passwords, but they're all very strong. If any good vendor will hash passwords, which means that if they're breached, the attacker has to reverse those hashes into passwords. And if they're 20 characters, and they're alphanumeric with different case and some special characters, it is very hard to reverse even with a cluster of GPUs. So that's a recommendation these days.
I think 2FA is a huge step towards making password change cycles less necessary or less frequent.
Yeah.
2FA, it takes away a lot of the danger that, if someone guesses your password and they don't have that second factor, you should probably change it. But, in a lot of the cases, you will find out that someone tried to get in using your password and couldn't because of that second factor was missing. So.
And Wordfence provides 2FA both via our plugin and then via a standalone plugin that just does 2FA, and I think maybe one or two other things. But and we use an sort of an industry standard way of doing that, right, Ram?
Yes. We use time-based one-time passwords. So, they're very secure. They're based on the time, which means that if your server's time sync is a little bit wonky, well, we also have something that helps with that. So, yeah.
It looks like Tamra in chat mentioned putting a gong on their letter to Santa. So every home should have one. They don't know, though, that Ram does a heck of a Santa voice. I think we might.
Oh, ho, ho. It is time to ring the gong.
There we go. Speaking of Tamra, I believe may have been one of our swag winners. We have a graphic here. So looking at the list, I believe we had nobody for the first question, one winner for the second question, so then we added some extras there. Andrew Clayton, Andy Dopert, Dave Harrington, a regular of ours, Dave Stevens, there's Yos Cleaver there, he's a frequent.
He's going to have so much swag.
Yes, hopefully we get some more pictures there. Tamra. We got Michelle Troxler. There we go. Mingus Lickus. Shiram Sethi and Andy Van Bell. Congrats to all of you there. So, we may have to ease up on the questions, next time because those first two were a little difficult. Okay, so Tamra says they are waving to Mark about 40 miles southeast of you there, so
hello,
local. Any other questions? Anything to cover for the three of you? We're 2 minutes past the hour here. We got the exploit leaderboard there.
I have a question. How is Chloe owning RAM in the exploit leaderboard? What's your secret, Chloe?
I don't know.
It's because she's amazing.
I have more time.
That's it. That's the secret.
RAM holds a lot of responsibilities.
And that's just this year, right? There was a number of vulnerabilities that each of you had found this year.
And published.
Published, right.
There are the swag answers there, which I neglected to mention. Answer 2 is 65 there. And Think Like a Hacker for the podcast. So, if we don't have anything else to go over, let's talk about some of the things that we've had our hands in, like the podcast. Ram, what's going on with the podcast? That's a Friday, Saturday sort of thing for anybody who's interested, right?
Yeah. Kathy Zant, our director of marketing, and I get together every, usually Thursday and talk about interesting hackery news for that week. And usually come out on Friday or Saturday and you get to hear us discuss, latest exploits, implications thereof, any interesting news in the WordPress world, anything that you absolutely need to update no matter what. And, I'll also talk about stuff that I just barely started learning about too. So, yeah.
Yeah, you guys do great. Now, speaking of the vulnerability leaderboard there, Chloe, why should somebody be subscribed to our mailing list, whether you're free or a premium user?
Yes.
You're doing a lot of work there. You're getting a lot of blog posts out, right?
Yeah, so you subscribe to our mailing list so you can find out when Ram and I find vulnerabilities, when they've been patched. We'll give you all the details about them, and so you can go and update if you haven't already. And then we also talk about some other general security things on there every now and then, so you can get your dose of other security things.
Yeah, and it's going to be, it might be the first you initially hear from something. It may very well be right from the mailing list there.
You'll get it before the press. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Get on the mailing list and just be aware, whether you're using free or premium, be aware of what's going on, what was found there if there's a really bad vulnerability. Some other things we like to talk about, open.film. Mark, you want to give us a little overview about that? And I believe, so our producer here that does all of our graphics and has our cool scrolling text down there, Sean, he played a massive hand in that as well, right, Mark?
Sean's like, don't bring me into the show. Please don't bring me into the show. We talked about this with him before we came on live, and I was like, Sean, if we want to bring you into the show, are you cool with that? And he's like, yeah. Sean's actually a filmmaker, and he likes to be on the opposite side of the lens to where we are now. So, Sean, we'll leave you out of it for now. But yeah, I worked with Sean Corbett and Andrew Rodriguez. Was it last year? It seems like forever ago. And they went around and interviewed a lot of folks in the WordPress community. And then Sean and I did post-production on that. I learned to be a film colorist, and I've actually become really passionate about that. And Sean and I are doing a course with a guy called Warren Eagles in a few days to go even deeper on film color, because it's super awesome. But anyway, we ended up making Open, which you can view at open.film. And that was premiered at the WordCamp US keynote last year. Matt Mullenweg was kind enough to use the first 10 or 13 minutes of his keynote to premiere the short film, which was unbelievable. Kerry, my co-founder, and wife, and I were in the back of the room, sitting on the floor against the wall, in a room that was like standing room only, with 1,600 people in the room. And as it went dark and this film came up, and it was an unbelievable feeling. And I'm completely hooked on doing that again. So we're doing various things to make that happen, even during the time of COVID. And we'll talk about that a little bit, perhaps on the show over the next couple of months. We're doing some really, really exciting stuff to try to reconnect with the community, but do it in a safe way as we get through what are rather trying times right now. But you can watch Open if you haven't seen it at open.film.
Tamara has mentioned multiple cheers for the email list, one of the core tools that helps keep them sane. That is nice to hear. Ram, so you did some QA on Wordfence Central and Wordfence Central Teams. Can you tell us a little bit about Teams for anybody who is not familiar with Wordfence Central and might have a small organization or could make use of that?
Sure. So Wordfence Central lets you manage a whole bunch of websites in one place. But this does lead to the question of, what if you have more than one administrator who needs to, manage a website? Do you just hand over your password to them, or do your Wordfence Central password to them? That's kind of not, best practice, for one thing. And for another thing, they might want to be able to manage it from their own account. So you can now invite other administrators to your Wordfence Central team. Basically, it's sort of a switch account feature where people that are on your team can manage sites in your account. At least as far as, Wordfence configuration is concerned, seeing alerts, configuring alerts. They can get a separate set of alerts from the ones that you're designed to get. So you can have, someone in an on-call rotation on one of your team and have them, set up to have all the events alert them, or specific events alert them, but only have other events alert you. And then, if something gets really bad and they triage it and they need to wake you up, they can do that. I've seen a lot of similar implementations of something like this, and this is one of the most rock solid ones I've seen. So yeah, if you need other people to help you manage your sites, Teams is the way to go.
Definitely.
Very easy to set up. We got a video on YouTube that goes through it. You can, if you have an account, you can get set up with a team and send out some invites in less than a minute. Before we head out, I want to say that I am very thankful for this team right here. Chloe, Ram, you guys are awesome. Mark, for allowing us to do this and coming
we're
on.
thankful for you, Scott. You're awesome.
Yeah.
You are, Scott. You are
Appreciate it.
actually awesome.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. The same with Kathy, who helps with our content, and Sean for on the spot getting this stuff up on the screen. We appreciate it. It makes it easy for us, every Tuesday. So if you're interested in this, if you're enjoying this, hit the bell, hit the subscribe button. You can hit the like button and
Hit the
Hit the
gong.
gong too.
Yes, yeah, we need a custom little gong.
Can we get one more
icon
gong?
down there?
Yes, hold on.
He's going to go back to the warehouse where he keeps it. Oh, yeah. Wow.
We got some thanks from some of our viewers. Yeah, that last but not least, all of our regulars who tune in and ask awesome questions and help out there, and everybody who views. So we really appreciate you tuning in each week, and we always look forward to it. Anything last words before we clock out? Chloe, Ram, Mark?
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming, everybody. It was nice to hang out with you, and hope to see you again soon.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.